Grandmother kept her important papers in a green metal box under her bed, and for as long as I could remember, she'd told me there was something in there with my name on it. She said it the way you say something you mean. Not as a promise, just as a fact. The way she'd say the lilacs bloom in May, or that the highway gets bad after the first snowfall. It was just true. I was 28 when she passed. It was February, the worst kind of Manitoba February, where the wind has a personal grudge against you and the sky stays gray for weeks, like it's grieving too. My grandmother, Nana Jean, we called her, though her name was actually Jeanette, died on a Tuesday morning in her own bedroom, in her own bed with the radio on because she liked the morning farm report even though she hadn't lived on a farm since 1987. I drove 4 hours from Winnipeg to be there. My stepmother was already in the house when I arrived. That should have told me everything. Her name is Viv. She married my dad when I was 14. And she has one of those personalities that fills a room the way cigarette smoke does. You don't notice when it arrives, but you definitely notice it in your lungs. She had redecorated our family home within 6 months of the wedding. New curtains, new paint, a sectional sofa that nobody was allowed to eat near. She never said she didn't like me. She was too smart for that. She just made sure I always felt like a guest in a house I grew up in. My dad is not a bad person. I want to say that clearly because it matters to the story. He is a kind, conflict-avoidant man who loves his wife and has a very hard time seeing the things she does that he doesn't want to see. His name is Rod. He's a retired pipe fitter, and he has a laugh that takes up the whole room. I love him. He failed me. Both of those things are true. My brother Nolan had already flown in from Calgary. He's 3 years older than me. Married, 2 kids, works in oil and gas. He hugged me at the door and whispered, "Viv's been going through Nana's stuff." I looked at him. He looked at the floor. That was the beginning. Nana Jean's lawyer came to the house that Thursday. His name was Mr. Calloway, and he was in his late 60s, wore a brown wool blazer, and smelled like the kind of peppermints that come in a paper roll. He sat at the kitchen table with a folder and laid everything out plainly. Nana had a small estate. The house in Portage la Prairie, assessed at around $340,000. A savings account. Some RRSP she'd never fully drawn down, and a separate amount she had specifically set aside years ago in what Mr. Prairie Calloway called a designated bequest, held in a trust at her credit union branch, in the amount of $42,000. For me? She'd told me there was something with my name on it, and she hadn't been lying. My dad got the house and split the savings with Nolan. That was fine, expected. What wasn't expected was what happened next. Mr. Calloway finished reading, gathered his papers, and asked if anyone had questions. And Viv, who had been sitting beside my dad with her reading glasses pushed up on her head like she was in charge of something, leaned forward and said, "What exactly does designated bequest mean for tax purposes?" Mr. Calloway explained that the trust was structured to transfer directly, that it had already been established years prior, and that I would need to contact the credit union to begin the release process. Viv nodded slowly, the way she does when she's filing information away. I should have called the credit union the next morning. I didn't, because I was grieving, because I was helping my dad sort through Nana's clothes and books, because I was a person in the middle of loss and not a person running a transaction. I stayed in Portage for another 4 days. When I finally drove back to Winnipeg, Viv hugged me at the door and said, "Safe drive, sweetheart." 2 weeks later, I called the credit union. I work as a licensed paralegal in Winnipeg. I've been doing it for 6 years. I work mostly in estate and family law files, which means I know how documents work, how timelines matter, how the language in agreements is not decorative. I mention this not to brag, but because it becomes important later. The woman at the credit union was polite. She looked up my name. She looked up the account number Mr. Calloway had referenced. There was a pause, the kind that's a little too long, and she said she'd need to transfer me to their estate services department. Another pause, a different voice. A man this time, who introduced himself as a senior advisor. He told me there had been a change of direction request filed on the account approximately 11 days earlier. 11 days. I had driven back to Winnipeg 9 days earlier, so this happened while I was still in that house, while I was folding Nana's cardigans into boxes for the Goodwill. I asked what change of direction meant. He explained carefully that the designated funds had been redirected out of the trust account into a joint personal account held by Rod Mathers and Vivienne Mathers. My dad. And Viv. I sat down on the floor of my apartment kitchen, not dramatically, My legs just stopped working for a moment. I asked when this was filed. 11 days prior. I asked who authorized it. He paused and said the filing had come with a letter of direction signed by the executor of the estate. My dad was the executor. He had signed something, or Viv had put something in front of him and he had signed it without understanding what it was. Either possibility was horrifying in different ways. I asked the advisor to send me a copy of the filing documentation. He said he would flag it for review and get back to me within 3 business days. I thanked him in a voice that did not sound like mine. I sat on that kitchen floor for a long time. I called Nolan. He didn't answer. I texted him, "Call me when you can. It's about the estate." He called back in 20 minutes, and when I told him what had happened, he was quiet for a long time and then said, "Are you sure you understood them correctly?" "I have 6 years of experience in estate law files, Nolan." "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, okay." I didn't call my dad that night. I needed to think. I'm someone who needs to think before I talk, and this was not a conversation I could afford to have wrong. I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote down everything I knew in order: the date of Nana's death, the date of Mr. Param, Calloway's visit, the date I left Portage, the date the change of direction was filed, the date I called the credit union, 11 days between Nana's funeral and my inheritance disappearing into a joint account. I also wrote down everything I'd noticed in the house and hadn't let myself think about yet. Viv going into the back bedroom alone more than once. A conversation I'd half heard between her and my dad that went quiet when I walked down the hall. The way she'd asked Mr. Dester Calloway about tax implications, not as a curious widow's stepdaughter, but as someone running numbers. I'm a paralegal. I know what an executor can and cannot do. An executor can administer an estate. They cannot redirect a designated bequest to themselves or their spouse. The trust was not part of the general estate. Nana had set it up separately, specifically years before she died. It already had my name on it when the estate was opened. My dad signing a letter of direction to move those funds was not within his authority as executor. It was, very simply, fraud. I slept maybe 2 hours. In the morning, I called my supervising lawyer at the firm where I work. Her name is not important to this story, but she is sharp, methodical, and has approximately 0 patience for people misusing estate instruments. I laid out the timeline. I told her what the credit union had told me. I asked if I was reading it right. She said, "You're reading it exactly right. You need to get a lawyer." "I work with lawyers," I said. "You need one who's yours," she said. "Today." I called an estate litigation lawyer that morning. We met the following Tuesday. She reviewed everything: the trust documentation Mr. Calloway had shared with me, the credit union's preliminary response, my timeline notes, and she agreed that the redirection of the designated bequest funds was not legally supportable. The funds had been placed outside the estate on purpose. My dad, as executor, did not have the standing to redirect them. Whatever letter of direction he'd signed had been either drafted incorrectly, signed under misunderstanding, or signed knowing it was wrong. We didn't know yet which one. My lawyer sent a formal letter to my dad and Viv within the week, with a copy to Mr. Calloway. It outlined the nature of the trust, the improper redirection, and the requirement to return the funds immediately. It also noted that failure to do so would result in a formal complaint to the Law Society regarding the estate administration and possible civil proceedings. I didn't call my dad before the letter arrived. I know how that sounds. He's my dad. We have a real relationship, even with everything. But I had watched him not see things about Viv for 15 years, and I knew that if I called him first, I would get a conversation that went in circles and ended with him saying he needed to talk to Viv and call me back, and that call would never come. I needed the letter to land first. I needed it to be real and formal before he could deflect it. The letter landed on a Thursday. He called me that Saturday morning. He sounded scared, which I hadn't expected and which broke my heart a little. He said, "I don't understand what's happening. Viv said that money was supposed to be released into the estate account and then redistributed. She said that was how it worked." "It's not how it works, Dad." "She said the trust documentation was unclear." "The documentation is not unclear. It has my name on it." Mr. Calloway explained it at the table. There was a long pause. She said Mr. Calloway misread the terms. I counted to 5 in my head. "Dad, I need you to listen to me very carefully. That money is mine. Nana put it there for me, specifically, years ago. It was not part of your estate to administer. The letter my lawyer sent is accurate. I need you to return those funds." Another pause. "I'd have to talk to Viv." "I know. But Dad, I need you to understand that this isn't something I'm going to let go. I'm not asking for a favor. This is legally mine." He said he'd call me back. He called me back 4 days later, not 2, and Viv was on the call. She started talking immediately, in that careful, reasonable voice she uses when she wants to sound like the calmest person in the room. She said there had been a misunderstanding. She said she had thought the trust was a legacy account, not a designated instrument. She said she had only been trying to make the administration simpler for my dad. She said, actually, that she'd been trying to help me because navigating a separate trust claim can be complicated for a beneficiary, and she thought consolidating everything would be cleaner. She said all of this like it made complete sense. I have sat across the table from people in depositions. I know what a prepared statement sounds like versus a real explanation. This was a prepared statement. I said, "I appreciate you explaining your thinking. My lawyer will be in touch." They started to say something else, and I said I had to go, and I ended the call. The credit union's estate department came back to me with the documentation I'd requested. There was the letter of direction signed by my dad, dated 11 days after Nana's funeral. Below his signature was a line I hadn't expected, a second authorization signature from Viv, in her capacity as, and this is the part that made my paralegal brain go very cold, assisting executor. There was no such thing as an assisting executor in Manitoba estate law. It's not a recognized role. The estate had one executor, my dad. Viv had no standing to authorize anything. But she had signed it anyway, and the credit union, who processes hundreds of estate files and relies on document submissions in good faith, had processed the letter. I brought this to my lawyer. She brought it to the credit union's legal department. This was no longer just a civil matter about redirected funds. There was a document in the file with a fabricated authorization. The credit union froze the joint account pending review. Viv called me the next day. No preamble this time, no reasonable voice. She said, "I don't know what you think you're accomplishing." I said, "I think I'm getting my money back." She said, "Your grandmother would be ashamed of what you're putting your father through." And I said, and I meant every word of it, "My grandmother is the reason I know this money exists. She told me about it herself. And she raised me to know that you don't let people take what's yours." She hung up. My dad called me 2 days later. He sounded different this time, quieter, with none of the scared confusion from before. He said, "Vivienne told me about the second signature." I waited. "I didn't know she was going to sign it," he said. "I signed the letter because she explained it to me, and I trusted her, and He stopped. I'm sorry, sweetheart. It is a complicated thing. Forgiving your parent in real time. You can love someone and still see them clearly. You can understand why they made the choices they made and still feel the weight of those choices on your chest." I said, "I know, Dad," and I meant it. But I didn't tell my lawyer to stop. The matter was resolved without going to provincial court, though we were prepared to go. The credit union reversed the redirection. The $42,000 was transferred to my account on a gray Wednesday afternoon in April, 7 weeks after Nana Jean's funeral. I was at my desk at work when my phone buzzed with the deposit notification. I went to the bathroom and cried for about 4 minutes. Then I washed my face and went back to my desk. There's a legal complaint filed with the Provincial Law Society regarding the estate administration. I did not file it to hurt my dad. I filed it because Vid signed a document she had no authority to sign and submitted it to a financial institution, and that cannot just disappear because it was resolved civilly. There are consequences to things. There should be. Nolan, to his credit, showed up. Not loudly, but steadily. He called when I needed him to call. He didn't ask me to make peace for the sake of making peace, which is what I had feared. He said, "You're right and she was wrong. I should have paid more attention." That was enough. My relationship with my dad is ongoing. We talk. He came to Winnipeg in May and we had lunch, and it was quiet and a little careful and real. Viv was not mentioned. I don't know what their life looks like right now, and I've decided I don't need to know. I have my own. The $42,000 is in a TFSA and a FSA now, split the way a financial planner suggested. I'm 31 and I'm saving to buy a place, and every time I think about that money, I think about Nana Jean in her house in Portage, with the green metal box under her bed and the farm report on the radio. She said there was something in there with my name on it. She was right, and I made sure it stayed that way. I still have the legal pad I wrote on that night. The one where I sat on my kitchen floor and made a timeline because my legs had stopped working. I haven't thrown it out. I'm not sure why. Maybe because it reminds me that there was a version of this story where I didn't write anything down, where I called my dad first, got talked in circles, and let the discomfort of confronting family convince me I'd misunderstood. The thing about what Viv did is that it almost worked. Not because she was particularly sophisticated, but because she understood something true about me. I don't like conflict. I grew up in a house where keeping the peace felt like a survival skill, and I carried that into adulthood without really examining it. She banked on that. She banked on the grief, too, on the fact that a person in the middle of loss is not a person who wants to fight. What she didn't account for was that Nana Jean had spent 30 years teaching me something quieter than fighting. She taught me to pay attention, to read the fine print on things, to trust what I knew and not let someone else's confidence override it. Nana wasn't a loud woman. She didn't make speeches. She just lived her life with a kind of steady honesty that I absorbed without realizing I was absorbing it. When I sat at that kitchen table with the legal pad, I wasn't being brave. I was just being her granddaughter. I think about that a lot, the way the choices other people make eventually catch up to them, not through punishment from outside, but through the simple logic of cause and effect. Viv signed a document she had no authority to sign. That signature created a record. That record became evidence. She thought she was being careful, and she was actually being careless. The way people are when they believe no one is watching closely enough. The world is full of consequences that look like bad luck, but are actually just outcomes. She made a choice. It had a consequence. That's not karma in any mystical sense. It's just how things work. What I'm more interested in is my dad's part in it. He signed something without understanding it, or without letting himself understand it. There's a version of that which is innocent and a version that isn't, and I'll probably never know which one is true. What I know is that when he called me and said I didn't know she was going to sign it, I believed him. And I also held the line anyway. Both of those things were right. Forgiveness and accountability are not opposites. You can extend one without abandoning the other. That's the thing nobody tells you about standing up for yourself. Within a family, it doesn't feel triumphant. It feels like sitting across from your dad at a quiet lunch in May, talking about the weather, both of you aware of the thing that's sitting between you that you're not naming. It feels like being right and lonely at the same time, and deciding that being right still mattered. The $42,000 is in a TFSA and an FHSA. Nana Jean put it there for me years before she died, quietly, without telling anyone else. She believed I'd know what to do with it. I'd like to think she was right.